The wind howled over the dry fields of Waverly County, carrying the smell of dust and old rain. The ranch had been quiet for months. Too quiet, some would say, ever since the day Claire Holloway arrived there with her single suitcase and her silence. The Holloway Ranch used to belong to her late uncle, a man whose death was called an accident in every paper, though no one truly believed it. When she inherited it, people whispered that it wasn't grief that made her keep to herself, but fear. The only one who came by often was Samuel Lorne, a rancher from across the ridge, the kind of man who fixed fences without being asked and spoke softly even when angry. He'd been there the day she moved in, helping her unload the old trunk from the back of her truck. She'd thanked him with that half-smile of hers, the one that never quite reached her eyes. Weeks passed before he ever went inside the house again. That night, the air was cold enough that frost gathered on the window panes. Claire had invited him for coffee, her voice trembling slightly. The house was dimly lit, and a heavy cloth, old, hand-woven, maybe a tapestry, hung on the far wall, covering something large and uneven. They sat for a while, talking about the livestock, the rain that never came, and the sound that carried through the canyon at night, a low, metallic hum that no one could explain. Samuel found himself looking at that cloth again and again. It didn't belong. Finally, he asked, "What's behind that thing, Claire?" Her hand froze on the coffee cup. The sound of the spoon clinking against porcelain seemed too loud. "Please," she whispered, "don't take the cloth off." There was something desperate in her tone, something close to terror. Samuel frowned, feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. But when she left the room to fetch more sugar, curiosity, or maybe something deeper, took hold of him. He stood, crossed the creaking floor, and reached for the cloth. It was heavier than it looked. Dust puffed into the air when he touched it. For a moment, he hesitated, hearing the sound of her footsteps returning. But then he pulled. The cloth fell to the floor, and Samuel started shaking. Behind it was a mirror, cracked, blackened around the edges, but still reflecting. Only the reflection wasn't right. He could see himself, yes, but standing behind him was Claire, her face pale and her eyes filled with something he'd never seen before, guilt. And in the reflection, she wasn't holding a sugar bowl. She was holding a revolver. When he turned around, she was empty-handed, just staring at him, trembling. "You shouldn't have done that," she said softly. "Now it's awake again." Samuel's throat tightened. "What is?" But before she could answer, the mirror flickered. For a split second, it showed the ranch yard, bathed in sunlight, and a man standing there, tall, wearing a broad hat. The resemblance to Claire's late uncle was unmistakable. Then the image vanished. She rushed forward, trying to cover the mirror again with the fallen cloth. "You have to forget this," she said. "Please, Samuel. Promise me you won't come back here tonight." He didn't know what to say. Her voice broke as she spoke, her hands trembling so violently she could barely hold the fabric. He wanted to help, to understand, but something deep inside told him that what she feared wasn't superstition. It was memory. When he finally left the ranch, the moon hung over the plains like a dull blade. Halfway home, he realized his hands were still shaking. That night, Samuel couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the reflection in the mirror, not his face, but hers behind him, holding the gun. The image felt more like a memory than an illusion, like something that had already happened. He tried to shake it off, blaming the long days and too little rest. But even the horses sensed his unease. They kicked at the stalls, restless, as though the air itself had turned wrong. By morning, the frost had melted into a thin fog that clung to the earth. Samuel saddled his horse, intent on returning to the Holloway Ranch. But halfway there, he stopped. He wasn't sure if he wanted to see Claire again out of worry, or something else. When he finally arrived, he found her outside, standing by the fence. Her eyes were red, but she wasn't crying anymore. The air smelled faintly of iron and smoke. "I told you not to come," she said. "You think I could just stay away?" Samuel asked, dismounting. "You looked terrified last night." "You still do." Claire looked past him toward the horizon. "You shouldn't be here, Sam. You saw it. That means it'll start again." He frowned. "Start what?" Instead of answering, she led him into the barn. Inside, everything was too quiet. No sounds of animals, no smell of hay. The air was thick with dust and something else. Old decay, faint but unmistakable. She walked to a corner, pulled away a tarp, and revealed an old wooden chest. When she opened it, Samuel saw bundles of letters tied with faded ribbon, a broken pocket watch, and a blood-stained ledger. The pages were warped, the ink smudged, but one line stood out clear in the ledger's margin. Debt paid in blood. Lorne, September 18th. Samuel's breath caught. His father's name. The date, almost 20 years ago. He stepped back, shaking his head. What is this supposed to mean? Claire closed the chest slowly. My uncle kept records on everyone in this county. Debts, secrets, blackmail, whatever gave him control. But there was one debt he never collected himself. He said he'd take it from the next generation. Her eyes lifted to his. That was you, Samuel. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then she said softly, I didn't know until after he died. I found the ledger, and I found the mirror. He wanted to dismiss it all, to call it nonsense, but the look in her eyes stopped him. He used that mirror for something, she said. He called it his record, said it showed truth when people lied. I thought it was just one of his cruel games, until what? She hesitated. Until I saw him in it, 2 days after the funeral. Samuel swallowed hard. You mean his reflection? No, she whispered. I mean him. Moving, breathing, smiling like he'd never died at all. Outside, the wind picked up, slamming the barn door shut. The sound made both of them flinch. Samuel forced a smile he didn't feel. Mirrors don't hold ghosts, Claire. They hold guilt. She turned toward him, her expression unreadable. Maybe guilt is the only kind of ghost there is. He wanted to take her hand, to tell her that none of this mattered, that whatever her uncle had done, it didn't define her. But when he reached for her, something flickered in the corner of his eye. He turned. The mirror, the one that had hung in the house, now stood leaning against the barn wall. He hadn't noticed it there before. Its surface shimmered faintly, like heat above asphalt. Claire froze. It followed us, she said. Samuel stepped closer, but the reflection didn't show the barn anymore. It showed a field, and in the field, 2 figures. A man and a woman, one holding a gun, and then the gun went off. Samuel stumbled back, heart hammering. The image vanished, replaced by his own pale reflection. When he looked at Claire, she was shaking. That's how it started last time, she whispered. That's how it took him. Who? My uncle. And if we don't stop it, it'll take you too. The fog outside thickened, curling against the barn doors. Somewhere in the distance, a single crow screamed, breaking the silence like a curse. Samuel didn't believe in curses. But as he stood there, the mirror's faint hum vibrating through the wood beneath his boots, he realized belief had nothing to do with it. Whatever the mirror wanted, it already had their names. And it wasn't finished yet. That night, rain finally came. It fell in thin sheets that whispered against the tin roof of Claire's house, steady and cold. Samuel had insisted on staying. She didn't argue. Maybe she was tired of fighting, or maybe she just didn't want to be alone with the mirror again. They sat near the fire, neither speaking much. The heat made the shadows dance across her face, softening her features, but not her fear. Samuel's hand rested on the table near hers, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from her skin. You really think it's alive? He said quietly. Claire's eyes flickered toward the covered mirror leaning against the far wall. I don't know if alive is the right word, but it remembers. It shows what it wants you to see, and it punishes those who don't listen. Samuel studied her. There was a sadness in her voice, but beneath it, something else. Regret. Claire, he said softly, what did you see the first time? She didn't answer at first. Then, almost too quietly, she said, my uncle, but not just him. I saw my mother. She was crying, begging him to stop. And then I saw myself, holding the gun. He frowned. You didn't. I did. Her voice broke. I killed him. The words hung in the air like smoke. Samuel leaned forward, his heart pounding. You mean you shot him? She nodded once, tears welling in her eyes. He wouldn't stop hurting people, Samuel. Not just strangers, family too. He blackmailed my mother, ruined her, drove her to the river. When I found her, she was gone. He called it justice. Said she paid her debt. That's when I took the gun. The fire cracked loudly, as if punctuating her confession. I buried him behind the barn, she continued. But the next morning, the grave was empty. And that's when I saw him in the mirror. Samuel didn't move for a long time. Outside, the rain had turned heavier, drumming against the windows like impatient fingers. Finally, he reached for her hand. You did what you had to do, he said. Claire looked at him through tears. You don't understand. The mirror, it doesn't show what happened. It shows what still needs to. He squeezed her hand gently. Then we'll face it together. For the first time in months, a flicker of warmth reached her eyes. But it lasted only a moment. A faint sound came from behind them, a low creak, like someone stepping on an old floorboard. They both turned. The cloth that covered the mirror was stirring, as if moved by wind. But every door and window was closed. Claire stood slowly, her breath trembling. Samuel followed, pulling the revolver from his belt, his father's old one. "Stay behind me," he said. The cloth slipped to the floor. This time, the reflection wasn't of the room. It was of the barn and someone, digging under the earth. Samuel stared. "That's the field behind your house." Claire's voice was a whisper. "The grave." Before either could react, the lights flickered and went out. Darkness swallowed the room, leaving only the faint glow of the dying fire and the shimmer of the mirror. Samuel moved closer, but as he did, a cold gust hit him. Not wind, but something else, something that felt like it came from the glass itself. For a moment, he thought he saw his own reflection twist, his face pale, his eyes blackened. Then the image cleared, and he saw something buried in the dirt within the mirror's frame. A body, and around its wrist, a silver pocket watch identical to the one Samuel kept in his coat, his father's. His breath caught. "That's not possible," he whispered. Claire looked at him, her expression filled with new dread. "Sam, when did your father die?" He swallowed hard. "He didn't. He disappeared. 20 years ago." The mirror pulsed faintly, the image growing sharper. And there, among the dirt and the roots, was another detail, initials carved into the grave marker. SL, the same as his own. Samuel stepped back, shaking his head. "It's not real." Claire's voice was trembling. "It's what comes next." Thunder rolled over the plains, and the lights flickered back on. The mirror went black, not reflective, just a void. Claire covered her face, whispering a prayer under her breath. Samuel didn't know who the mirror had buried, his father, himself, or both. But one thing had become terrifyingly clear. The Holloway Ranch didn't just keep the past alive. It was preparing to bury the future. The next morning, a thin sun pushed through the mist and turned the fields the color of tarnished gold. Samuel had barely slept. He kept seeing the black glass pulsing in the dark, the grave in the reflection, and those initials carved into the marker. Claire moved quietly around the kitchen, a shawl drawn around her shoulders. She looked exhausted but composed, the way people do when they've cried past the point of tears. "I made coffee," she said softly. He took the mug and watched the steam rise. "The grave in the mirror, do you think it's really there?" She didn't answer at first. "I think the mirror shows what's buried but not forgotten. And sometimes, that's worse than the truth." Samuel set the mug down. "Then we dig. If there's something out there, I have to see it." Claire hesitated, then nodded. Together they crossed the yard. The wind had died, and the only sound was the crunch of their boots in the damp earth. When they reached the back field, the ground looked undisturbed, flat, dull, innocent. But Samuel's hands shook as he knelt. They dug in silence. The soil was heavy and cold, full of roots that clung to the spade. Claire stopped first, pressing a hand to her chest. "Here," she whispered. Something pale glimmered in the dirt, a fragment of metal, small and round. Samuel brushed the soil away and lifted it free. It was a pocket watch, badly rusted but still recognizable. When he turned it over, faint letters shimmered beneath the grime. SL. His own initials. He looked at Claire, unable to speak. She shook her head, backing away a step. "It can't be yours," she said. "You're here." Before he could answer, the air grew colder. The wind began to move through the grass again, whispering like distant voices. Samuel glanced toward the house and froze. The front door was open, swinging slowly, and a faint glow shimmered inside. "The mirror," Claire breathed. They ran. Inside, the glow came from the parlor. The cloth had fallen again, and the glass shimmered with a dull light that moved like smoke. Samuel approached it cautiously. This time the reflection showed neither the barn nor the grave. It showed two children playing by a riverbank, one dark-haired, one blonde. The blonde boy was laughing, holding the same pocket watch in his hand. The dark-haired girl threw a stone into the water. Samuel felt the breath leave him. "That's us," he said. Claire's eyes widened. "That's not possible." He stepped closer. "You remember this place?" That summer by the Waverly River, when the fair came through. Her expression changed slowly as memory surfaced. Your father and my uncle were partners back then. They fought over money the night before the fair left town. The scene in the mirror shifted. The children vanished, replaced by two men shouting in the barn, the same barn where Samuel and Claire had stood the night before. A gun flashed, just light, no sound, and one man fell. The other dropped the weapon and ran. Claire covered her mouth. That was them. Your father and my uncle. Samuel could barely breathe. The mirror wasn't showing the future last night. It was showing what happened then. They stood there, the silence pressing between them. Then Claire turned toward him, her eyes wet but steady. If they killed each other over money and we're standing here now, what does that make us? He reached for her hand. Maybe what they couldn't destroy. For a moment, the tension broke. She leaned into him, and he wrapped his arms around her. It wasn't the wildness of passion. It was a quiet, aching need to feel something alive amid all the ghosts. When they pulled apart, the mirror had gone still. Only their reflection remained. Two tired people standing too close, tied by history and something deeper. But the calm didn't last. From the corner of the room came a sharp click, like a lock turning by itself. The ledger on the table had opened. A page fluttered in the draft, and new words bled through the old ink, forming slowly, letter by letter. Debt not yet paid. Claire's voice trembled. It wants someone else now. Samuel stared at the words until they stopped moving. Then he looked back at her. Then we find out what it wants, and we end it. For the rest of that day, they searched the house as if it were a map. Every drawer, every loose board might have hidden a fragment of the truth. Samuel found receipts in his uncle's neat handwriting, newspaper clippings folded into letters, even a single photograph of two young men standing proudly beside a stallion. One of them was his father, the other, Claire's uncle. The year printed on the back was 1904, a lifetime before everything turned bitter. They started together, Samuel murmured. Before the debts, before the lies. Claire traced the edge of the photograph with her thumb. They trusted each other once. Maybe that's why the betrayal stayed alive so long. She sounded almost tender saying it. Samuel realized that for all her fear, she was still looking for a piece of forgiveness somewhere in the wreckage. The mirror in the parlor remained covered. Neither of them wanted to look at it again, though they could feel it there, listening. By afternoon, the wind had changed. A dry heat rolled through the valley, stirring up dust devils across the plain. Samuel decided to ride into town for supplies, and perhaps information. Claire insisted on coming. Whatever this is, it has both our names on it, she said. They rode side by side, the horizon stretching wide and pale before them. The closer they came to town, the more ordinary everything felt. Children running, a dog sleeping in the sun, a train whistle echoing from the east. Yet Samuel couldn't shake the feeling that the air itself had eyes. At the records office, they combed through yellowed files until Claire found a thin folder marked Holloway, Lorne Dispute. Inside were half-legible statements, signed in trembling ink. One line caught Samuel's attention. Transfer of deed pending repayment, witness withheld. He frowned. There was a witness. Someone saw what happened. Claire leaned closer. Who? But the name was missing, the page torn cleanly at the edge. They returned to the ranch near sunset. The sky burned orange behind the hills, and long shadows stretched across the porch. When they stepped inside, the air was cooler than it should have been, as if the house had been holding its breath all day. The cloth had slipped again. Samuel set down the lantern, ready to cover the mirror once more, but something stopped him. In the glass, he saw the reflection of the ledger on the table, its cover open. Beside it lay another object that wasn't there in the real room. A small brass key. Claire, he whispered, look. She followed his gaze. Together they turned toward the actual table. Nothing but the ledger. But when Samuel reached underneath the lip of the wood, his fingers brushed metal. The key. Cold, real. It fit the lock on the chest in the barn. They opened it together that night. Beneath the letters and old tools lay a bundle wrapped in oilcloth. Inside was another book, smaller and newer than the ledger. Its pages filled with short notes in two different hands. Some were his father's, some were her uncle's. They weren't just recording debts. They were recording people. Each entry listed a name, a date, and one word beside it. Paid or owed. Halfway through the book, Samuel found a page dated only 3 days before his father disappeared. Next to the date was written, SL, owed in full. Witness, CH. Claire's initials. She stepped back, shaking her head. I was a child. I couldn't have signed anything. But someone used your name. The mirror, still uncovered in the house, began to hum. A low, vibrating note that rolled through the walls. Samuel felt it under his skin. Claire turned toward the door. It's calling us again, she said. They returned to the parlor. The glass now showed the same barn they had just left, only empty except for the chest. On its surface appeared writing, slow and deliberate. Find the witness. Claire whispered. Whoever wrote my name must still be alive. Samuel nodded. And until we find them, the mirror won't stop. Outside, lightning flickered behind the clouds, throwing brief silver light over the fields. For the first time, the house felt less like a home than a stage waiting for its last act. Claire looked at Samuel, her expression caught between fear and something softer. If we find the witness, and it ends, what happens to us? He reached for her hand. Then maybe the debt really will be paid. They stood there as the storm broke, wind tearing through the open doorway, rain spilling across the floor. The mirror dimmed to black again, leaving only their faint reflections, two figures trying to hold on to each other while the world rewrote its own story behind them. Morning came washed clean by the night's storm. The land smelled of wet cedar and soil. Samuel and Claire packed a small bag and rode into town again, following the one clue the mirror had given them: find the witness. They began at the courthouse, where the town clerk, Mr. Tanner, remembered the old case with reluctant curiosity. He was an elderly man now, his hands trembling as he turned the brittle papers. 2 men fought, he said. One vanished, one found dead, or so he thought. The witness never testified. Name went missing from the record sometime later. Was there anyone who handled those records afterward? Samuel asked. Tanner squinted. Deputy at the time, John Merrick. Lives up near the ridge now. Retired years ago. The name fell heavy between them. Merrick had been Claire's uncle's closest friend. They thanked Tanner and left. As they rode north, the road narrowed to a track lined with juniper and rock. The old Merrick cabin appeared suddenly out of the trees, its roof sagging but smoke curling thinly from the chimney. Merrick opened the door before they reached it, as if he had been waiting. He was thin, sharp-eyed, his white hair swept back from a face the color of paper. I wondered when you'd come, he said. The past's been restless lately. Inside, the room smelled of tobacco and rain. Photographs cluttered the mantel, faces long gone, ranches swallowed by time. Merrick poured coffee into tin cups and motioned them to sit. You were the witness, Claire said quietly. He nodded. I was. But the sheriff told me to stay quiet. Said both men were gone and the land would eat the story soon enough. Only it didn't. Samuel leaned forward. Tell us what you saw. Merrick looked into his cup. Your fathers were partners, until greed set a trap. Holloway kept 2 ledgers, one honest, one not. He accused your father of taking money meant for the ranch hands. There was shouting, a struggle, then a shot. But it wasn't either of them who fired. Claire's brow furrowed. Then who? A third man, Merrick whispered. Someone neither of them saw. Someone paid to make the quarrel look like murder. When I found the bodies, one was still alive. He pressed this into my hand. From his coat, he drew a small brass locket and placed it on the table. Inside was a photograph of a woman holding a baby, Claire's mother. On the back, written faintly, keep her safe. Claire's eyes filled. My father didn't kill him, she murmured. No, Merrick said. But the sheriff needed the case closed, and Holloway's name carried more weight. I signed the ledger as witness to keep you out of it, Claire. I thought that would end it. But some things don't die just because you stop speaking of them. Outside, thunder rolled again, though the sky was clear. Samuel felt a tremor under the floorboards, a low vibration like the hum of the mirror. Merrick's gaze shifted toward the door. You brought it with you, didn't you? The mirror? Claire asked. It doesn't stay put, he said. It's tied to whoever still owes the truth. You found me, so it'll come here next. Samuel rose. Then we have to finish it. Tell us what we have to do. Merrick sighed. When that mirror was first made, Holloway had it blessed and cursed all in the same breath. Said it would show the guilty their own reflection. The only way to silence it is to make it witness one last truth. He turned toward them, his voice suddenly fierce. Whatever you're hiding, from each other, from yourselves, speak it when it comes. No lies, No silence. That's the price. They left the cabin as evening fell. A wind had risen again, carrying the smell of rain. Claire rode close beside Samuel, the locket clutched in her hand. If the mirror wants truth, she said, then maybe it isn't a curse at all. He looked at her, the fading light turning her hair copper. Then we give it everything it asks for. Behind them, miles away, something flashed at the edge of the valley, a pale shimmer in the darkness, like a mirror catching the last light of the sun. The ride back from the ridge was quiet except for the wind in the mesquite trees. They rode without speaking, the words of the old deputy echoing in their heads. When they reached the flat stretch before the ranch, the sun had gone down and a pale half-moon was rising over the hills. Samuel dismounted first and helped Claire from her horse. The house looked smaller in the moonlight, fragile, as if a single breath might make it crumble. They stepped inside. Nothing moved, but the air smelled faintly of iron and smoke again. "The mirror's been here," Claire whispered. Samuel lit the lamp. The glass stood in the parlor exactly where they'd left it, the cloth still draped over it. But the edges of the fabric were dark with soot, as though burned. He reached for it, and then stopped. "Maybe we don't need to look anymore," he said. Claire shook her head. "We can't end it by pretending it isn't there." Together they pulled the cloth away. This time the mirror didn't glow or hum. It only showed them standing together, tired and hollow-eyed. Then, slowly, letters began to bloom across the surface as if drawn in dust. "Tell the truth." Samuel's throat tightened. "What truth? We've said everything we know." But Claire was staring at him, her face pale. "Not everything," she said. He turned to her. "Claire, you were there that night." Her voice trembled. "You said your father disappeared, but you were with him, weren't you? You saw what happened." He looked away, the lamplight flickering on his hands. "I was a child. He told me to stay by the river. But I heard the shot. When I ran to the barn, I saw your uncle fall and my father standing over him. I ran before he saw me." Claire's eyes filled. "You thought your father killed him." "I did," Samuel said quietly. "Until last night. Until I saw the mirror." The glass shimmered, and for a heartbeat it showed the boy he had been, standing outside the barn, dirt on his face, tears on his cheeks. The image faded, leaving only their reflections again. Claire stepped closer to him. "Then we're both haunted by things we didn't do." He reached out and touched her cheek, a brief, trembling gesture that felt like forgiveness and confession all at once. She closed her eyes, leaning into his hand. "Whatever it shows next," he said, "we face it together." They waited. The mirror darkened, then brightened again. This time it showed neither past nor present, only their two faces merging in the reflection until they were one. The words beneath appeared slowly, almost tenderly. "Debt paid." A sound like a sigh filled the room. The glass dulled, turning gray, then clear again. It reflected only the ordinary room, the lamp, the table, their shadows on the wall. The hum was gone. Claire let out a breath she hadn't known she was holding. "Is it over?" Samuel nodded slowly. "I think it is." Outside, the wind dropped. The night was still. They stood together in the quiet, the mirror blank behind them. And for the first time since either of them could remember, the house felt like a place that might hold peace. But as the lamplight flickered lower, Samuel noticed something faint on the glass, an outline, barely there, of two hands pressed side by side, his and hers. He smiled. "Maybe it's just making sure we keep our promise." Claire smiled back, and for once the expression reached her eyes. Weeks slipped by quietly. The valley changed the way it always did after a storm. Fences mended, grass returned. The air smelled of new things instead of old regrets. Samuel moved his few belongings from his cabin across the ridge to the Holloway house. He told himself it was only to help with the work, but everyone in town already knew. When the two of them rode into the feed store together, people simply nodded, as if some long argument between heaven and earth had finally ended. The mirror stayed in the parlor, veiled and silent. They kept it not from superstition, but because throwing it away felt like throwing away the truth they had fought to reach. Sometimes at night Samuel would pass the doorway and think he saw a glimmer of light beneath the cloth, but it was the kind of light that comforts rather than warns. One afternoon, while sorting through the last of the papers from the barn, Claire found an envelope sealed with wax gone brittle with age. The writing on the front was steady, elegant, to the one who still listens. Inside was a single sheet of parchment and the faint scent of cedar. The letter was dated decades earlier, signed by a craftsman named Elias Moreau, the man who had forged the mirror. His words were simple. I made this glass for a man who wanted justice and found only vengeance. I gave it the power to remember what people forget, hoping it might teach them mercy. If you are reading this, then mercy has won at last. Keep the mirror not as a weapon, but as a witness that even the darkest debts can be forgiven. They read the letter twice, then a third time. When they finished, Claire folded it carefully and placed it back in the envelope. Maybe it was never cursed, she said. Maybe it was just waiting for someone to listen. Samuel smiled faintly. Seems we did a lot of listening. That evening they walked out to the edge of the property. The sky blazed with the colors of sunset, rose, gold, a thread of violet where the hills met the clouds. The ranch spread out before them, ordinary and endless. I used to think this land was haunted, Claire said. Now it just feels honest. Samuel took her hand. Honest is good. We can build from that. For a while they stood without speaking, the wind moving through the dry grass, carrying the faintest echo of water from the creek below. The sound reminded Claire of that childhood summer by the river, of laughter and lost time. She leaned her head against Samuel's shoulder. When night came, they lit a single lamp and set it beside the mirror. Its flame wavered gently, reflected 100 times in the softened glass. No ghosts appeared, only their two figures, side by side, illuminated by quiet light. Do you think it remembers us kindly? She asked. He looked at their reflection and then at her. I think it remembers the truth, and that's enough. They turned down the lamp. The room dimmed. The mirror faded into the dark, and for the first time in years the Holloway Ranch slept without whispers. Years passed the way soft rain falls, one drop at a time until the seasons blur together. Waverly County changed little. New fences rose where old ones broke. Trains came and went. The horizon remained as wide and pale as ever. But the Holloway Ranch no longer carried a shadow. The house stood mended, paint bright against the grass, and laughter could sometimes be heard from the porch where two children played at dusk. Samuel and Claire aged gently into the rhythm of the land. They never spoke much about the mirror after that last night. It remained in the parlor, veiled, a quiet witness. Sometimes visiting neighbors caught their reflections there and said it gave them a feeling of calm, as though the house itself approved of them. Every year on the anniversary of the storm, Claire would take down the cloth for a moment, polish the frame, and whisper a single word, "Thank you." Then she would cover it again. When Samuel's hair turned silver, he built a small bench by the river. He told their children it was where the world began for him, and where he hoped it would end. Claire found him there often, hat in his hands, staring at the water with a thoughtful half-smile. In the town's small library, someone eventually donated a bundle of papers, the two ledgers, the letter from Elias Moreau, and a note written in Samuel's firm hand. For those who inherit stories heavier than their own hearts, remember that truth is not the same as punishment. Sometimes it is the only form of love left to us. After their passing, the house went to their eldest daughter. She kept it much as it had been. Same furniture, same soft light through the curtains in the morning. She kept the mirror, too, and though she never saw it shine the way her parents once had, she swore that on clear nights she could hear a faint hum, not of fear, but of contentment, as if the glass was still breathing alongside the house. And so the legend of the Holloway mirror softened over time. What began as a story of debt and death became one of forgiveness. People said that couples who looked into it together never quarreled again. No one could prove it, but no one tried very hard to. Some things are better believed quietly. When the ranch finally changed hands again, decades later, the new owners found a small engraving on the mirror's back, hidden beneath the dust of years. It read, "Truth kept. Love owed. Paid in full." They left it exactly as it was.